Asher Mir, the Vex-infected scholar, armed with a certain piercing vocabulary that would disarm nearly any guardian, has been seen making his final reports from the planetoid of Io. Io, the last place the traveler would touch, at least according to Ikora. It is a land of mystical features, presenting fossilized creatures long since embedded into the ancient echoes of old oceans. Io, home to the Vex Pyramidium, a massive darkness pyramid ship sitting upon the horizon, as if surveying or preparing for the oncoming end. In this report, we will look into Asher's final moments and attempt to decipher his rather cryptic vernacular to provide a sense of clarity to us all. Perhaps for the uninformed, or even those of you who find outpost leaders across humanity's old claims amongst the stars to be a bit dull, you may not know of whom we speak. Perhaps you aren't truly to be blamed. Guardians are, after all, the frontline heroes and heroines of our time, so focused on driving back the constant threat of defeat that you have had little time to dialogue with armchair commanders far from the fronts. Make no mistake, you are not to be blamed if you've brushed past the likes of Asher or Vance or that bipolar AI and so on, but the backstory context may be additionally helpful to flesh out the disposition within Asher's reporting. Asher Mir is an Awoken Warlock, affiliated with the Jensen Scribes, and likely Reefborn due to his obligation to said scribes. Some of you likely know that the scribes pay homage to a certain Techian, or Awoken Tech Witch, as many tend to call them. The scribes are researchers and supreme scientists bent on defining the natural and paracausal world into tightly knit words into a common but dense encyclopedia. This obsession is harbored by all Jensen scribes, but is no more pronounced in any than perhaps Asher Mir, a victim of his own curiosity, now seemingly half Vex, half Warlock. A curious plague that has been noted to afflict guardians in the past. Those who have braved the first runs within the Vault of Glass reported similar experiences with Vex material, attempting to assimilate their living code within the minds of guardians. During Asher's encounter with the Genesis Mind, deep within the Pyramidium on Io, he and his fire team found themselves forever changed. Not just physically, but psychologically as well. Brachion, the Genesis Mind, had used the intruding guardians as an opportunity to experiment upon their flesh and upon their light. We know that when humanity first encountered the Vex centuries ago, scientists from the Ishtar Collective found that a certain Vex mind had created lifelike copies of said scientists and began to torture and experiment with them, all within the Vex's simulation. Of course, the scientists knew, or at least believed, the simulated versions of themselves were not real, but began to question if they themselves were in a simulation, and that the real versions of themselves sat safely out in another world. A paradox, to be certain, but such is the Vex. Now, tangent aside, we were discussing Asher's encounter with Brachion after the battle amongst the questionable Radiolorian Lake. Asher and the fire team lost consciousness, and their memories shortly thereafter were wiped, only to reawake, return to the tower, gravely wounded and modified with Vex skin, and to fall into yet another coma just before the onset of the Red War. This is Asher Mir as we know him today. Part Vex, part Warlock, heavily motivated by an urgency to understand, to calculate and define. His mind perhaps accelerated by the Vex advancements forced upon him, partially pronouncing his social disposition and disdain for brazen stupidity or ignorance. At least, the hope is the context we just shared may help explain some of his dismissive demeanor reported by guardians who found themselves traveling to and from Io quite often. Asher's first discovery or you could say setback, was probing the shield technology of the pyramid ships. A certain variation of stasis and transportation of material that comes into contact with an invisible but present shielding technology. Guardians in the tower, a great many of them studies of well repute, state that this is another form of stasis power. Powers of light or darkness we commonly see in forms of solar arc and void. Stasis, in the purest of definitions, is a period or state of inactivity or equilibrium. To Guardians, the pyramids offer the greatest foe of our time, the most potential for battle-earned glory. But to Asher, the pyramids and the promise of the darkness offer a different set of opportunities entirely. The chance to fulfill his own inquisitive nature, a chance to determine the weakness of stasis, or even how to master it to be utilized against our enemies. Before, there was a reluctance to work with various members of the Vanguard. Now, Asher seems more willing than ever to assist Ikora's Hidden and Drifters mercenaries, all claiming to be guardians of different beliefs and factions. To Asher, testing stasis and the capabilities of the pyramids is the key to ultimately winning the war of light and dark, of finding a new solution for humanity and all its offspring. But to find that pinnacle solution would require more of him than the Genesis mind had ever taken. Man of science though he was, the first thing Asher Mir did was shoot the damn thing. He charged the magnetic coils, waited for the wind to die down, and broadsided the ship. He expected the projectile to hit a kinetic barrier, or best case scenario, impact the pyramid and cause utterly infinitesimal damage. Instead, at the moment of impact, the projectile stopped existing. As Asher continued his experiments, he found that the projectiles flung at the pyramid shield didn't merely phase out of existence and into another, but rather were held in place, made undetectable, but were still physically within the shield, a form of zero-point energy. In layman's terms, is it at absolute zero, the theoretical point in which atoms of molecules cease movement, there remains still some perpetual motion of energy, as the universe cannot be defined so precisely to reach a direct zero. At least, that's what we believe. Of course, the coming of the Hive, the Vex, and all the races of the universe have continued to challenge our somewhat primitive understanding of science or the laws of physics. It seems, however, quite clearly that the pyramids and the darkness, brimming with paracausal power, can write their own laws well beyond our current understanding. For some time, many who had encountered Asher Mir had believed that the Vex skin graft or biomechanical enhancement he now carried had done more than merely change his visage. They believed the Vex ornament that nestled closely against his flesh had seeped a poison into his mind, an affliction that could not be cured, could not be fully excised from the body, but rather merely slowed. Asher found himself often agreeing with Dead Orbit and their philosophies. We should retreat from this dead system and leave its dead secrets for those who intend to pillage it. We should leave the traveler to its fate and save ourselves. But as you know, Asher is conflicted. His affliction of the physical Vex poison has perhaps changed into that of a mental one, slowly becoming consumed by artificial bodies within his own mind. Perhaps this is why he asked Eris to ensure measures were taken so that the future was secure, that he had written letters, likely of farewell, to those he had worked with during his time as a devout Jinsen scribe. Asher once again ventured into the Pyramidion, now armed with a newfound determination since the vanquishing of Brachion by his ever-talented assistants, as he would call them. First he found confrontation that led to dumbfound caution by the Vex. After he eliminated a few hundred or so, the Vex did not continue their assault upon him, as if he found himself at the Radiolorian Lake in the sky, an impossible structure of formation made only possible by the undefinable Vex. He assumed his final form and submerged himself headfirst into the lake, bringing it down upon himself. This final report is difficult to fully define, and I assume many of you have your own definitions as to what occurred or what is occurring to Asher. Perhaps he finally succumbed to the Vex poison coursing through him. It would explain why he made certain assurances with Eris. Perhaps Asher sought to fully become Vex, or to become as close to Vex as possible, to ensure that the pyramid above Io's surface could not take full advantage of the secrets within the pyramidium. Or perhaps the Vex had finally accepted him, half guardian, half hive-minded machine, in an effort to help shore up the Pyramidians' defenses against the oncoming tide brought by the darkness-infused pyramids. There are a series of questions and theories we could make to help define such a feat made by this Jimson scribe, but I turn this proposition to you, Guardians. What do you believe? Now, as you develop your answer, please stay safe. It seems our evacuation plans have been made secure through your efforts, but I fear this war is far from seeing its final casualties. Hey everyone, Wally here. Hope you enjoyed this video. Wanted to do one on Asher Mir before we saw a lot of the content vaulted. Personally, I think he's one of the more unique characters in the Destiny lore that didn't have so much lore fleshed out about him, but I think this endpoint is really interesting. Now, obviously, I think he's going into the Pyramidium to help defend it from the darkness coming, right? I think the idea here, though, is that he and the Vex share a unique relationship, a symbiosis, if you will, some type of father-son-esque bond, right? Or brother-to-brother bond, because he is kind of part Vex. So it's going to be interesting to see what if, in the future, these planets ever do become unvaulted, or they do return, or these characters return, potentially Asher and the Vex could be one thing, right? Or he could have a subgroup of Vex helping us fight the darkness. There's a lot of good theories out there that I think the community is working through, and I'm definitely interested to see a lot of them. Who knows, right? This could just be the way to tie up his story. We may never see him again. I hope that's not true. I personally think Asher, probably one of the better characters, at least in my opinion. With that being said, next week I'm going to do a lore breakdown of the VidDoc or ViDoc video that came out recently. Just kind of go through some implications, walk it through a little bit slowly, just to something a little different, right? And then as new lore comes out in Beyond Light, I'll be covering that. With that being said, I hope everyone's doing well. I know it's been a really, really weird year for me personally. You guys know I've been off for about 4 months. A lot of things have been going on with work, and that sort of is the priority, obviously, just trying to continue to upload content as regularly as possible, and I appreciate you guys continuing to support me. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace.